Are you an ambitious leader ready to break through limiting beliefs, align with your purpose, and thrive in your career without sacrificing your well-being or postponing your true desires? I'm Diana Ordonez, certified high-performance coach and your host. Each week, we'll dive into actionable insights and research-based strategies to help you unlock clarity, build unshakable confidence, and take courageous action toward a life of impact and fulfillment. If you're ready to overcome fear, embrace growth, and step boldly into your next level, you're in the right place. Let's create a life filled with courage and purpose together. Welcome back, everybody, to the Courage and Purpose podcast. I am joined today by my great friend, Juliana Arango, and she is a certified professional coach who specializes in creating change and transformation by creating a deeper connection with your values and finding your true North Star. I'm so excited to have Juliana here with me today because it's such a bizarre and just interesting and fun story about how we even became connected. So, as most of you know, my business name is Life on Purpose Coaching. And randomly one day, I received a DM on Instagram of a Instagram reel. And I clicked the reel because it caught my attention because it was by an account called Life on Purpose. And I said, wait, that's weird. And I clicked on it. And then the message also was coming from a person with my name, Diana. So I was like, this is so weird. Who is this person? And I clicked on the reel and it wasn't sent by Juliana. It was sent by a Diana person that I never heard from again, by the way. But I clicked on Juliana's profile page and I started to learn about her story and I was learning more about what she does. I was like, she's a coach like me. And she had, I let you tell your story, but one of the things that also drew me in is that she talked about loss, losing her father, and she had lost her father around, a young age, like my daughter did. And a lot of what she was saying just resonated so much with the same messages that I was talking about. And like just instinctively, I just had to reach out to her. And she actually responded. And next thing we knew, we were on a Zoom call and we had like all these like life overlaps of things that we were both kind of going through and thinking about and feeling. And we just became such great friends. And I'm so excited to finally have her on and talk about all the things that she teaches and, believes in and advocates for. And I think you will just love to have this beautiful perspective. She's such a beautiful soul and a beautiful light in the world. So thank you, Juliana, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I love that story. That is a story of synchronicity.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, it was, we'll probably talk about this today at some point too, is like I am such not a, social butterfly, we'll call it, right? I'm not an extrovert by any means. But I've found that in my life, as somebody that is very introverted, there are just certain people that I just have like this absolute knowing, like I have to talk to them. I have to have lunch with them. I have to, like, I just kind of feel this pull that I don't have even enough time to think about or question or, anything like that or, overthink. It just kind of like feels like that's what's supposed to happen. And then that was definitely what happened that time when I saw that come in. And I would say I'm a very spiritual person. I believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe that God puts special people in our lives at a very special time for a purpose. And so I'm happy to say that I listen when that voice uh, tells me that I need to reach out because every time that I have, and that's probably why it's become so easy, it's always been this like magical thing where it was exactly who I needed to talk to at that time or opened up opportunity or possibility or just I guess energetically was very aligned, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I love that you mentioned God because I remember around that time, I was in a lot of conversation with God, and it felt so crazy to have someone like you come into my life. And I
Oh,
don't think we would have met if our handles hadn't been Life on Purpose and we weren't, sorry, hate to sound corny, but we weren't really living on purpose at that time when we met. So
Yeah.
it was all just magical timing.
Yeah. Actually, what you mentioned, if our handles hadn't been Life on Purpose, because now you've actually created a different account, right, for your coaching business. And so tell us about what prompted that and what this new approach to coaching is as opposed to what maybe you were doing before.
Yeah, Diana, I think it goes to the core of our conversation today, which is change and transformation, right? When we are living intentionally, there's times when life communicates things that just aren't working. And so Life on Purpose was my personal account, and I decided to make that my coaching account. And thank you for the shameless plug there, but the new Instagram is J Arango underscore wellness. And so this new redirection comes from a just a recent review of my values and what's important to me and back to my North Star. And even though purpose is important for me, wellness has been extremely important in the last couple months because it's taken me out of environments that I needed to come out of to come back on track, to be in alignment once again.
Yeah. So tell us what it means then to create change and transformation by aligning with our values and what our true North Star is, right? How do we find that North Star? And when you talk about the last few months, it sound and you like reevaluate it. Does this align with my values? Tell us what that looks like, what that sounds like, how you got there, and how you help people um, get more connected to what that means to them.
I think, we could talk about that forever and ever because it's a deep topic. I think we'll get to the iceberg top of it and later on we'll dive in. But, in few sentences, I think what transformation and change means, it means conflict, right?
Mhm.
I believe that there needs to be an internal conflict for change to happen. And a lot of the times we either stay there in this coin term I've been talking about, that comfy discomfort, where we just stay
Mhm.
there and we settle there. Or we listen to that discomfort, whether it's in our bodies, it's in our environment, it's in our head, but it's discomfort, it's friction, and we do something about it. Right. So for me, change and transformation has always been about sensing a specific type of discomfort and not settling and just getting very curious. And in that curiosity, my values have always come into play. I wanted to mention today in our episode that values are so important for me because, and I love that you mentioned my dad, but my dad, when I was like 6 or 7 years old, gifted me a book about values. It was a children's book, and it was a children's book that taught about values. And so that book, talking about change, I was born in Colombia, I immigrated to the US, and through the multiple changes and moves that I've made, that book has always been in my left hand, just ready for the
Mm.
next chapter on my values.
I love that you mentioned your dad and how that played such an impactful role in your life.
Yeah.
Uh, one day I hope that Mia takes the books that I buy bought her with her.
Oh, I'm
Um,
telling you, it's those that we get in childhood that we bring into adulthood. They mean
because
something.
you know what? I think just thinking about the books that mean a lot to me that I've gotten for my daughter, it's also such a reflection of them, right? Like I feel like that's probably how you also connect with your dad, because it does show like so the books that are really important to me that I gave my daughter
Huh?
and that I read to her are What Do You Do with a Problem and What Do You Do with a Chance?
Wow.
Yeah. And they're children's books, but I like sometimes I read them and it's like I'm reading them for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I read them to her, but I know that like that message in the way you speak to a child is really for me sometimes. I needed that reminder today.
Yeah. Back to the basics.
Yeah.
Let's change
And
back to the basics.
yeah, because I think that's such a I think one day maybe she'll see it too. Like it's such a reflection of what I want to instill in her. And so it's a book that's a reflection of what your dad wanted to instill in you. So maybe tell us a little bit about the book before, we dive into what it is today, but what is the message there? Like, what does it say to you?
You know, that book for me, and it's funny you asked me that because I actually brought it back out again when I was just reimagining what life could look like this year. Obviously, we just came off of January. I cannot believe it's about to be April, it's March. But I was doing my
Seriously.
inventory of what 2025 was going to look like. And I knew I needed diet change. So I brought that book out. And what does that book mean? That book is literally an exercise where you just scroll through the pages and you pick what sticks out. And it's funny because it's in Spanish. So
Mm,
just seeing words like justice,
mm,
seeing words like righteousness in
mm,
Spanish just gave me, that vigor that I needed to think this is who I am. A lot of the times in change and transformation, we may have walked away from that sense of identity. And so it's so important when our values can give back clues, as to who we are, because it's in that sense of clues that we get clarity, and it's in that clarity that we start walking on firmer ground to
mm-hmm,
start vocalizing what our new truth is going to be, right? And that
mm-hmm.
was the next step. Like, how am I going to speak about what this is, and how does it resonate with me? Because we need to vocalize it in order for it to come to fruition, right? It can't just stay internally. It's one of those that it's worthwhile to share and to be open about.
Right. When I heard you say, how are we going to speak about what this means to me? Like, what I heard is like, what's the story that I want to tell about this experience? Because at the end of the day, even as you talk about like building our identity, it is the story that we tell about ourselves and who we are and why we are this way. And so talk about how we need to, or we how do we inspire change when maybe we don't have a story that is empowering, right? Like,
How to inspire change when our story is not inspiring. You know, I personally think that all of our stories are empowering and are inspiring. I think I think it's so important to remember where you come from and sort of take inventory of where you've been,
hmm
because in the name of humanity, there are so many commonalities that we all share with each other, right? Whether it's grief, whether it's adventure, whether it's curiosity, there are so many ways that we can inspire each other, right? So I think if you are having trouble getting to the inspirational part of your story, I think it's because you haven't remembered it well enough, right? You haven't taken the time to truly take inventory of where life has taken you, what have been those inflection points, because it's in those inflection points that we can inspire, right? It's in moments where the road has sort of forked in two directions and we've chosen either or we've had dark nights of the soul or sunrises of the heart. It's in those moments that have been big in life that we can inspire, right? And I don't think life is flat all the time for anybody. So it's learning where those bottoms and lows and highs were and how we tell that story. To your point, our story is our identity, and our identity is a story.
well, also we get to choose our story. Like, it's like almost like marketing. I hate to bring it to there, but
Bring
it's
it up. That's been a past life. So I
yeah, yeah.
like talking about marketing.
So it's like you can look at the same product, whatever. You can look at the same thing and frame it in a way that is inspiring or exciting or the beginning of something, as opposed to just looking at it and seeing what was ordinary about it, right? Like just like even the way you photograph a product is gonna make it either more inspiring, more exciting, more interesting, versus just front on, bad lighting and and no context, right? And so it is about like how do we either fall in love with our story or create a story that we love, right? Or look at it as a beginning as opposed to just what is. Like, oh, how wonderful it would be that, oh, because I see my story as this, like, just plain, life, that this is my call to adventure. And this is just the beginning of what's happening next. Like, I'm still building this story. And I had a friend just actually, as we were planning a podcast, say, my second act is going to be
Oh, love that.
twice as good as my first one. And it is
Love that.
about like it's all about like my best days are ahead of me, right? If you firmly choose to believe that belief, it's true for you. And so talk about, when you kind of turn the pages in this book to reconnect is I guess what I heard in that with what your values are, to remember what your identity is. Why is that important? How do you what does that symbolize? Because you talked about identity, right? Your values are part of your identity. Is your identity locked in? Um, like why should someone take the time to do these things? Like, right?
Yeah. You know, first of all, I'm gonna remember what you just asked me about what's the why in our values in our book, but I've got my intuition that is just telling me to say this in this podcast for people that may have been like me, where it felt like my story was not worthwhile. And so, in the name of marketing, supply and demand, right? When you
Hmm.
have supply, there's going to be demand. So, if you supply your story to the world, you're going to grow demand for your story. We
Say
don't
more about
necessarily
that.
have to. Yeah, I have this burning desire for people who may be listening to remember that when we put our story out there, we are giving our story a chance to have demand, right? Because I love that you were saying that we can reframe it and we just started our story and there's so much reinventing to do.
Hmm.
It's very fair. However, if you've already lived some life and you are just demeaning it as not cool or not important or not worthwhile sharing, because that
Okay.
happened to me for a very long time. Like I just
Hmm.
didn't feel like my story was worthwhile. I had such little self-worth that I thought, who wants to hear from me? But if we're talking about marketing and then we're talking about stories, think of the magic of supply and demand. So for those that may be afraid of sharing their story, give it a try.
Mm.
Give sharing your story a try.
So, like, don't assume that you have this story that is not worthwhile. Actually, give your story some airtime and
Yeah.
let people show you what's magical about your story, right?
And in there, like if you're having trouble, we can come back now to the conversation of the book. If you're having trouble getting the bravery to share your story, what is your why in sharing your story, right? Because it's when we discover our values that we give ourselves intrinsic motivation. We give ourselves life force. For me, my values have been life force. So when we don't know our values, I would dare to say that we don't have life force. We're just on autopilot.
Hmm.
For those that maybe are hesitating to share their story, when you think of your why and you connect that to a specific value, think of how much more powerful your intention and your inertia to share your story will be. Maybe it's in the name of righteousness, maybe it's in the name of justice, maybe it's in the name of creativity. There's so many ways that we can connect our values to motivate ourselves through life.
So, why is it important to tell our story, though?
I think it's important to tell our story because it's in telling our story that is when we get to know who we are. It's almost like that active practice.
Hmm.
It takes two to tango, right? So when you're telling your story, you're telling the world who you are, but you're also telling yourself who you are. And in doing
Mm-hmm.
that, personally for me, I found two of our most powerful coaching tools, which are acknowledgement and validation. So there is a
Hmm.
tremendous amount of healing that happens both physiologically in our bodies, psychologically in our minds, and within our environments, in our communities, when we tell our stories.
Hmm.
There is a massive, massive effect that telling our stories has.
Yeah. So I would say to add to that, um, that when we tell our stories, it's not just like this is what happened. It's like remembering how you felt,
Mhm.
right? What you thought at the time, what the struggle was, what was joyful about it. Like emotionally connecting with your story will kind of allow you to, like you said, know yourself better.
Exactly.
Um, and knowing yourself better, I think you're right. It is what allows us to know what's important to us and also know then what we strive to create in the future, right? If you knew what was important to us in your past and what you took from it, what inspiration, what joy, what pain, what caused you pain, then you're better equipped to know what you want to create in your future. And, unfortunately, I think it becomes hard um, when someone has a really difficult past, right? And then, or maybe it was just um, a very monotonous past. We could say either one of those, right? And it becomes hard to be creative then about what the future could be because we are kind of, I don't know if wired this way or just societally, like why this happens. I'm not exactly sure, but I know we all have a tendency to look to the past for evidence about what the future will bring, right? And so when you think about that, um, what are some, because you say you drive change and transformation by finding your true North Star. And so it's like what I hear in that is, my life was monotonous or it was really difficult. These are all the reasons why. And then to understand that the North Star is in that, right? So how do you, when you do, because I know you host these vision board events and I want you to talk about them. How do you facilitate a process to move people to that creative place, to move people to okay, well, yes, this is my story. This is how I connect to it. And opening up your mind to believe, okay, someone's going to take something from this. And like you said, creating demand by creating the supply. Um, and then moving them towards, let's now create your true North Star. Let's understand from that story what your values are or what you want your values to become, because I know you say your values are your identity, but I also believe that your identity could change. So tell me about that. How do you facilitate that in these events or even in your coaching? Or I'm very interested to hear, like,
Well,
practically
I
speaking.
love, love, love talking about vision boards because they've been a very powerful tool personally for me. And in recent years, they've been an amazing source of creativity for me and my community to connect with people during these exercises of vision. And in the last workshop that I did in February, it was funny because my sign up sheet had what's your first name, what's your last name, give me your email, but then also what is your favorite word or your favorite color.
Hmm.
And so I had people have a little mini aha moment of what is their favorite color, what
Hmm.
is their favorite word, why, because what does that do? In a way, we don't analytically think that our favorite color is yellow. We don't analytically think that our favorite word is serendipity. It creates something internally for us, right? So when we are in this process of figuring out our vision, or maybe we don't know what our vision could be, there's a couple things you can do, and one of them is turn off your logic. When you're dreaming,
Mhm.
you want to turn off your logic. You want to connect to a sense of playfulness, of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, turn off your head, turn on your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if you have heard of this before, but I was doing some research. I've been really big on emotional intelligence lately, just on how I can bring that over to leadership. That'll be another podcast we do on leadership and emotional intelligence. But I've been doing some studying, and I actually read the other day that the electromagnetic field of our heart is 5,000 times stronger than that of our brain.
That.
And so imagine the powerful generator of energy that our heart is. It's not woo woo, it is
Mm-hmm.
factual. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about vision with non visionaries, we want to get them off their head into their heart. A lot of times people don't know what that is. I've had
Mm-hmm.
an uncle back in Colombia, very frustrated one December, say, what's this thing about getting into your heart? Like, what do you,
Yeah.
heart is always beating. And so I was only able to get him to his heart by talking about his youth.
Mm.
What did he liked to do as a kid? What was your favorite activity? What caused you joy? What was something that you have pictures of doing? And so when you connect people to their heart, you get them to a sense of, a sense of playful identity that is able to stretch their imagination a bit more so that they can see what they can't see, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So funny that you mentioned your favorite color because somehow right before this call, that's what we ended up talking about, right? You mentioned my yellow sweater, and I was like talking about, well, actually, my favorite color is red. I don't even like yellow, but I I kind of understood that yellow felt sunny, and today was like I wanted to feel sunny, right? But if I really think about my favorite color, and I don't know, maybe this is an exercise for people, and I don't know if everyone has this kind of connection to their favorite color. Um, but somebody once told me, "What's your favorite color?" I bet I can guess. And I was like, "Okay, what do you think my favorite color is?"
Uh-huh.
And they said, "Women always like one of two colors." I'm like, I don't know if that's true.
That's a funky way to start.
Yeah. It was actually what actually I just realized he's a coach, and it was my boyfriend's good friend, and I was meeting him in person for the first time. I had heard a lot about it, but I was just meeting him for the first time. And and I know this is not true because um I've met many women whose favorite color weren't one of these two, but I have to ask you now, what is your favorite?
Yellow and blue, girl.
Oh, yellow. Okay. It's funny.
I love
See,
yellow.
oh, awesome. Oh, and I'm wearing yellow today. Okay, good. It was meant to be. I didn't know
Well,
why I wanted to wear the yellow today,
I didn't
but
tell you,
that
but
is
I thought,
why.
how perfect is it that
See?
you were on our podcast day?
See? I I'm telling you. It is an intuition type of thing. So I didn't know that, and I'm glad I wore it now. But he told me it's either gonna be red or green. I
Oh, he
said, why is that? Huh?
got you there with the red.
Oh, but he did get me, right? And so I maybe he meant women like you. I don't know. But
Uh-huh.
he said, well, because red is a representative of a woman that is wants to connect with love and passion and that depth of emotion. And then green is somebody that wants to also, in essence, go into the depth of peace. I think this or I don't remember the green as much because I the red because it
Yeah,
wasn't
you
my
held on
favorite
to the
color.
red. You were
But
just trying to validate the red.
yeah, I locked in the red, and he's right. I mean, that is what I connect with in the red, right? Is passion and love and like vibrantness, but from a depth because it's also um even in our society, I guess, is connected to some of these emotions, right? And I think that's what you're trying to do, right? But to get into the heart, you have to be connected to what the color means to you, right? And so I know yellow is a happy color. It's sunshiny and
That's
and
it's
that's
one of my
you.
values. Like
Yeah.
it all goes back to each other. You know, when you said red reminds you of passion,
Yeah.
how close is that to one of your values?
Of course, yeah. For real. So I'd be curious what those people out there that love. Well, you said your other favorite color is blue. So is there an emotional connection to that in any way?
Peace. So when I learned
Peace.
that
Okay.
blue had a psychological effect of calmness and tranquility on the brain, as a mindful movement facilitator, I thought that's got to be my color every time I'm teaching a class. So blue is, what I inspire for people to feel in my presence. I want them to feel a sense of peace and
Mm.
tranquility and calmness and zen
Mhm.
because peace is one of my values.
You just reminded me of a branding. I don't remember if it was a branding class or a marketing class, and they touched on branding and they talked about colors. Colors do invoke a sense of some kind of emotion, and they talked about logos. And if you're going to be a tech company, you want to have blue in your logo. If you're
That sense
a
of trust.
Yeah, it was like if you're a banking company, green is a good color. It's like abundance, right? And actually maybe that's what he said about green. I don't remember, but it was like it is like just kind of a part of us because it's plays such a part in our senses, and our senses, move our nervous system, and our nervous system moves our emotions. And so I have to say, I was one of those people that if you said get into your heart, I would get very frustrated. I would be like, what does that even mean?
Give me the ROI. What is the ROI of getting into my heart right now? Can you quantify that for me in a KPI?
Like why? What is this doing? Like, can you give me a step-by-step
Give me
formula
an
for how to do
SOP.
this
What
thing you
what's
want me to do?
the operating procedure for this heart stuff?
Yes, exactly. My therapist would be like, where do you feel that in your body? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know where. This is all one thing. I don't know. It took a long time to listen and understand what she even meant by that, to be honest. Um, and it is about my understanding of it now, and you can kind of help me with this, is that it's about paying attention to the sensations. And the minute that I wanted immediate results, I wanted to like right away know the answer. And the problem is like I had to get very quiet and start with just even understanding what I was feeling in my body in the moment to then go deeper into like what do I feel when I think of something, or you know what I mean? Like to just understand, to make the connection with what it means to pay attention so that
Mhm.
then I can move from that to okay, now what do I feel when something like this happens? So it was like, okay, sitting here right now, what do I feel? Like, I don't feel anything. What do you mean? So then it had to be like, okay, I guess I feel, maybe some soreness in my shoulders. Maybe I feel um some restlessness in my foot that I keep
Tingling in your
tapping,
foot. I was gonna say tingling in the foot is always yes, yes.
right? Maybe I feel like I think about all the different things that came up. It would be things like, I don't know, maybe I have like some itching happening. Like even like something that's so stupid and simple as the stuff that you ignore in your body for so long, that is what then caused me to pay attention more so that then when I'm trying to understand how I feel about a memory or a concept, then I'm already trained, because otherwise I would never, right? Like if I didn't understand, okay, sitting here right now, what do I feel in my body? And to know that that means like the physical sensations in my body, like I started to realize I would just ignore little things or not pay attention to them or just blow past them. Like even just like, oh, I have an itch or oh, I have some soreness in my shoulder, some tightness, or I have like restlessness, or I have, you know, I don't know, like any sensation like that. Like, oh, it was it because then it when we were talking about things, then I would, because I'm starting to pay attention, notice like, oh, there's some like heaviness. I didn't, you know what I mean? And so I think it's hard um to do if you've never done it, but what you're saying is if you can kind of bring up a highly emotionally charged memory, that kind of helps you connect with your heart quicker, um, so that you can get some insight. I have to say, like, one of the things about that comes up for me, and you said, where were you most joyful as a kid? I I stopped playing at a very young age. I got very serious because I saw it as like my duty to do well in school and get that scholarship. And what I know now is that I've always had ADD, lately, diagnosed late in life, but school was very demanding for me. It was very a struggle, and English was a second language starting off school. And so I was like, this is my only priority as a very small child. And my sister, younger than me, was like, it was so sad when you started school because I wanted to play with you and you would just tell me you were always busy. As a 5-year old, okay?
The level of industriousness.
So, industriousness, that's a funny, adjective for a 5-year
Yeah, girl.
old. But it's it's interesting now talking about it actually, because where I was gonna go with that was I when you say connect with what was fun and playful in your childhood, I have a very hard time pulling up any like memory of me playing. Like the only memory I have of me playing was I used to create these like trains and airplanes and tents, right? And it would be like we're going to a far off land and we would like be flying, And this was at a time where we
Discovery.
weren't traveling at all as a family because we were very poor. So I don't know where I got this concept from necessarily. I just was fascinated with getting on planes and trains and like boats and stuff. Um, and now that you're saying that, like that's the only memory I have of me playing, and it became a really big part of my life later. And so it is somehow weaved into your childhood, I guess, that what seemed important to you as a kid, in your play ends up being very important to you as an adult because it's kind of that part of you, right? The other thing I played was teacher, and these are like for anybody that can resonate with this, like, oh, I didn't really play, and I didn't, I don't have memories of me playing. I will bet you can find, if you dig far enough, one or two, and if you really pay attention, um, you might find a theme.
There's a clue.
There's clues. Yeah, that's the right word. But the other thing that as I was talking about it to you, I realized, you know what? It seems that I repeated that pattern as adult too, where I was very highly focused on, achieving, and then I realized I'm not having fun anymore. Like what happened?
And that happens to a lot of us that can't connect to a heart. So if I can add one more extra thing in there, that actually was my problem. Like I didn't to kind of like you, I didn't really have a lot of nice memories that I could connect back and play because I had turned them off. Some of us deal with trauma that have turned off specific memories. So if that's the case, what worked for me was a lot of stillness and a lot of breath.
Hmm.
So connecting with our heart, I don't want anyone hearing this to think like I'm not connecting with my heart because I'm not feeling refreshing positive emotions. Sometimes
Hmm.
heart is the uncomfy, challenging
Hmm.
emotions that we no longer feel because we have left our body in the name of safety. But
Hmm.
as I was listening to you speak about how you couldn't really connect with your heart and you were always in your head, what a crazy paradox, right? That as as logical beings that we were for a very long time, how mindless, how mindlessly were we living that we could not connect with our body anymore? How insane that there's that paradox of like, I'm in my head all the time. I can't connect with my heart, but I am mindlessly living through life. I am on full autopilot.
Yeah. Well, there was a study that said it's probably related to the this concept of your heart has a broader electromagnetic field, where it's also they're calling the heart your like first brain,
Yes.
right? Um, because it operates as a brain more so. And actually, you can lose your mind and still be alive, right? Like it is the powerhouse that gives us
Yep.
life and controls most of what happens in our bodies. So it's important that we pay attention to it. And what you said before, I think is so powerful that I want to like re-emphasize it. It's like, yeah, if we connect with our heart, it's not always going to feel good, right?
Process to
And that
connecting with our
and if you had a lot of hard, painful experiences for a child, it's not war. It's not like and for some children it is war, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
sometimes when we think about trauma, we think, I didn't have a traumatic experience, therefore this doesn't apply to me. But hey, when you're a little child, a traumatic experience is anything that feels deeply, deeply hurtful to your nervous system. It doesn't have to be, a highly traumatic experience like an event, but if something was deeply painful for a child, and that could be, a series of many painful experiences, you do learn to kind of shut those off. And like if I connect with my heart, it's so painful to go through this over and over and over again. That could be a parent that rejects you. It could be a parent that, uses punishment to try to motivate positive behavior. It could be so many things that, depending on your level of sensitivity as a child, would signal to you, I have to shut this off, or just as a survival mechanism to just be able to get through life, right?
Sending love to all our HSPs that are listening. We love you. Our hearts are open to you. We get
And
it.
you know what? My therapist put this in a really beautiful way. At least I felt that it was. It's like when you talk about the label, HSP. My daughter is a highly sensitive person too. It's like it's not that, there's anything wrong with you. It's just like, aren't there people that have very sensitive skin? Aren't there people that get bruise easily, that get rashes easily, that sunburn easily, that whatever, right? There, you can have think of it that way. The skin that covers your nervous system is highly sensitive, and that's just different. And then, just like we don't yell at people, why are you burning your skin so easily? Right?
Yeah.
Like your nervous system has very thin layer protecting it. And so when events happen in our lives and we have a very thin layer protecting our nervous system is very sensitive to any, um, you know, I want to say stimulus, but any
Same
any
factor.
su yeah, any like signal of danger, right? And so if you're a kid and people are yelling at you or there's slamming doors happening, like anything that signals danger to a nervous system, and you have this awareness of your nervous system, you're gonna feel stressed out all the time and fearful, and that doesn't feel good, right? And so, yeah, it makes sense that you are shut off, and now that could be why you can't dream or can't be creative, and not can't, but it's harder to connect with that part of you.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that you mentioned nervous system. I absolutely love that you mentioned nervous system because if we're bringing it 360, it's, how I was mentioning stillness and in our breath is when we connect with our heart. And a lot of the times, the nervous system of people that have challenge connecting with their hearts, me included, is because we were in fight or flight for a
Mm-hmm.
very long time. So we stayed in that fight or flight. So it's in our parasympathetic nervous system that we find that safety to be,
Mm-hmm.
to dream, to open up, and to be vulnerable. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
I love that you talked about creating safety.
Mm,
Is That's so important because it is that feeling of being threatened that creates the shutdown, right? And so let's talk about how maybe even in your events you create safety for that to happen, but maybe how we create, well, how we could intentionally create it in our organizations, in our homes, right? On our athletic teams, in our, in our yoga classes. Like, how can we intentionally create a space that creates the safety to be creative, inspiring, um, dream about the future, rather than what I would say is maybe the opposite, is like complacency or feeling like a victim, or even competitiveness, I would feel is like the opposite of this space, or envy, or, all those lower vibrational states.
safety is such a big word, right? Safety in an organizations. When you say safety, I think the first thing that speaks to me that comes up is emotional intelligence, right? How as
Mhm.
leadership, we have a duty to ourselves, our lives, and our organizations to acquaint ourselves with emotional intelligence, right? What does it mean to be in touch with our intuition? What is active listening really about? Because it's when we have leaderships that have a high EQ, that they're able to, one, give autonomy to their people,
Mhm.
create a sense of fulfillment to their people, and
Mhm.
collectively figure out the purpose, right? In
Mhm.
these three, I think figuring out the why for your organization amongst your team members is so important. That for me is psychological behavioral safety. And then if you ask me
Mhm.
how I bring safety in these retreats and workshops, breathing
Mhm.
will only find, well, for me personally, I have found a lot of safety in breathing. So if you want to create a sense of space and safety within your own body, your own aura, a box breathing is a really good tool. When you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you
Mhm.
release for 4, and you hold at the bottom for 4 seconds. And one that I know tickled my class last time that I did my mindful morning movement was the 4-7-8, where you breathe in
Mhm.
for 4 seconds, you hold for 7 seconds, and you release for 8. So those physiologically will create safety within your body and collectively if you're together as a team. And if we're talking about safety in workplace, we really want to sharpen our EQ so that we can create a space of autonomy, fulfillment, and purpose within our organization.
Yeah. I think as you're talking about the breath and how important that is, I think one of the realizations that I had to come to was that like my brain is not separate from my body. Like my body is important, right? Like
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. I thought, how much more can I give this brain? How much more can I ignore my body and still live?
oh my God, yes. How much more can I
Takes
ignore my body? And the thing is, when you, I try to teach these things to my daughter, and one of the things I say to her is like, that was kind of an aha moment for me, even as an adult, was like, how is your brain supposed to be actively functioning in a, in at its best capacity when it's getting no oxygen?
Oh my God, yes. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It's like you need oxygen. And it's also um like all the cells in your body need oxygen, and all the, your nervous system is in a heightened state because it thinks it's in danger, and you're holding your breath. Like if you're underwater, you're holding your breath. You're going to drown. And
And
that's what you're
you're doing
telling
it
your body.
mindfully. like you're doing it mindfully when you're underwater, but what we forget sometimes is that there's so many different things that our body needs to do, that our brain just says, okay, you're going on autopilot and we'll be intentional here. So the things that our body needs every day, every second, our brain just does on autopilot. So we stay
Mhm.
in our default mode network thinking that we're breathing correctly, but really we have gotten so far away from what actually healthy breathing is that a lot of us don't know the difference anymore.
Well, because we put ourselves in highly stressful states and then we ignore what's happening in our body while we're in those states. And so it's like, what do you, I guess it's the idea that I'm communicating something to my body based on what I'm choosing to do. And if I'm choosing to ignore it, I'm communicating like kind of like you're on your own. I'm not going to protect you. I'm not going to take care of you. It's like and like you said, it is about the nervous system because if you're in fight or flight, you can't access your rational brain at all. I think that that connection was also a big part of it, and it's like understanding that your nervous system responds to your breath.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. One of the things I've that was just mind blowing to me was somatic work in
Oh my God.
general. Yeah.
Pigeon pose for the win.
But like even something as simple as like just stroking your skin because of our connection to the nervous system is through our senses, right? So the touch on our skin, I, even like when we talk about our nervous system and the senses and we're stroking the skin. One time someone had me like hold my face
Huh?
like as if when you hold your daughter's face, well,
So
you don't have
you
kids,
cup
but
like when you cup
you
it.
kind of you kind of cup their face in their hands. And I did this, I think it was actually probably during an EMDR session, but I was just stunned on what that sensation like signaled to my brain and my like what I felt.
Mhm.
And so there's so many things like that, right? Like yoga poses definitely will signal different things to your nervous system, to your and therefore your emotions because they're so strongly connected. But obviously, people are like, I'm not doing yoga poses in my conference room, right?
Uh-huh. Fair,
So,
fair.
and maybe it's changing now more in corporate where, like, hey, maybe when you do have a meeting, you are facilitating some breathing at the beginning of it. I don't know. But aside from that, there's so much that happens even psychologically to build safety. And you talked about it a little bit about how emotional intelligence allows you the ability to build safety with your team. But practically speaking, right? Do you have some examples that you could share with us about what that looks like?
If we want to be practical and tangible, something that's coming up that I was learning about recently is how the limbic system in our brain is the one that activates um, the motivators for our employees,
Mm,
right? So
hmm
if we want to communicate something to them or bring them along for a project or a goal or a vision,
hmm
want to figure out the why first, what's in it for
hmm
them,
hmm
get that buy-in, then you do the how, and then you do the what. So in that
hmm
order of, don't tell them what's going to happen. That doesn't make anyone safe because
Hmm.
it completely takes them out of the process. If you figure out and if you explain to them what is the why in it for them, what does it mean for them to be part of this? You get
hmm
their energetic buy-in, you've turned on their limbic system that is part of, responsible for emotions and negotiating extrinsically, internally. You get them to collectively talk about the how, and then you talk about the what.
Yeah.
So when you're figuring out the why with them and you're communicating that, you are giving them a sense of autonomy.
Yeah.
People don't like when leadership just tells them what to do.
hmm
Communicate the why.
You know, luckily, because of Simon Sinek's, TED Talk, a lot of people kind of understand this concept more conceptually because of, it's become more widespread why people buy from you because of your why, not because of what you're doing. And I think maybe if we could just practically talk about some whys, right? Like, okay, yeah, I understand people don't buy what you sell, they buy why you have the product. Why the why is so important. And maybe you have some examples of what are some powerful whys that will move an organization. Like some of the most boring products, right? I almost want to talk about well, I won't talk about that, but I'll talk about I had a client who sold promotional products, right? And for her, her why was more about the way where the money went from her profits. It was a nonprofit organization that helped women um, get out of really terrible situations where they were being trafficked, women and girls. And so they were taken out of human trafficking situations and then empowered with a craft, brought resources to have a place to live and um, to to be able to kind of get back on their feet. But then they also were empowered with a craft or a business that they could then run on their own, whether it be learning to sew or learning to create something of their own. And this is in I forget where it is. I think it may have been in the Philippines. Don't quote me on that, but it's in a space where they can that this was a viable way of sustaining their family, right? And so for her, it was really about the more profitable we are, the more women I can help, and therefore the more women you can help. And so also in her organization, she would grow people. So it's like we're not just selling promotional products, we're changing lives here,
Uh-huh.
right? We are
Distilled
in, huh?
distilled to that one point.
And she really was not just the women that are being trafficked, but in her organization, she took such a priority to grow her people, like her teams, because she would coach them and empower them. And they did, book clubs and all these things to instill personal growth in them. And so her people said things like, before I worked here, I didn't know that I could do anything. That now I have this empowered mindset around that I can make anything happen, and
Mm.
that I could be anyone or anything that I want to be. And that is life changing. And to her, it's like, yeah, she liked promotional products. She liked to skim through catalogs as a young girl, and that translated into an interest in promotional products and building her business that way. But her deeper like purpose was around changing the lives of the people in the organization, changing the lives of these women, and then we eventually connected it to her end customers too, right? Changing the lives of her end customers and how they're more empowered to grow their businesses through their promotional products because they're able to provide that same energy that they do internally to the businesses that they work with. Like, yes, you're going to be able to meet this goal, and this is just one of the tools that you have to spread your message, your purpose. And so that's a really go-to example for me because people think promotional products like,
Yeah. How
you
could
know,
you ever?
what deeper why could you possibly have in that, right? Or whatever. But like I think there's other industries that probably think the same way. Things like maybe I will mention this. I my boyfriend works for a company that creates pipe for construction sites, for building sites, and anywhere I think that needs water management. I don't know too much, right? Like I can't tell you very much more than that. But like, so what would you say would be some examples of ways to inspire those people, right? Like what is the why? It's not like because we're building pipe. Right.
Exactly, exactly. I think an easy way to put it so that we can remember is separating the who from the what, right? So,
Okay.
like, the what is the box of what the world tells us and the action,
Mm-hmm.
but the who is the sense of identity. So, when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about why with our employees, it's almost about getting to the core of the identity. So who are they being when they're putting these pipes? Not what they're doing, but who are they being? If we're
Mm,
trying to get them to join our vision, what is the who in that situation? And how can we use that to paint a picture for our organization? So for example, in the case of of these builders and these construction pipes, it goes back to values, right? Like maybe we are establishing people's safety. So who are we being? We are guarding safety for people, not just
mm,
putting down pipes. So always try and differentiate the who from
mm,
the what, so that you can connect more deeply with the employee's why.
mm-hmm. I love that. Um, so I'll share a personal story, and I don't like to always talk about it because I think it's somewhat controversial. But when I worked in corporate, I worked for a medical imaging company, right? And one of the things that I always battled with was this why, right? Because we sold imaging equipment to the beauty industry. And the beauty industry, in my opinion, again, like I don't say this from a place of like judgment or because I think a lot of people have strong feelings about this, where the people that feel the opposite feel that the beauty products in the industry, and I know it sounds even controversial for me because I have makeup on, right? It's not like I don't partake in the beauty industry at all. I think the place where I felt the most controversy was like the message is if you do these things, we're enabling you to or empowering you to feel better, right?
Mm,
Feel better, feel good in your skin, and right? And yet, for me, the imaging equipment and the consultations that were happening, I interpreted to be, hey, these are all the things that are wrong with you. These are all the things you need to fix in order for you to feel good. This is why you need to stop your aging. This is why you need to look different. This is, why you need to buy our product to feel good about yourself.
mm,
And this is why it's controversial because you could look at this in from different perspectives. There were people that said, well, they already felt this way about themselves. You're just giving them a way of seeing the way that they could feel better. Or there's different ways that you could look at this. Like, yes, youth is a sign of vibrancy and it means longevity. And so it's natural for you to want to give them that. And it impacts their career because people hold these beliefs about aging and da da da, right? Like it, this was a hard why for me to accept because my why kind of like in life, right,
mm,
is no, we want to empower people to love who they are and discover who they are and to be more centered on who they are like inside, not like out here. And yes, like I said, I have makeup on, right? Like I understand that there are certain ways of like wanting to accentuate your certain features and whatever. And I understand, for the most part, you will find me without makeup on. Because I refuse to believe that my beauty lies on the surface. I know I'm going to age. I know that that's inevitable, and I rather work on my ability to embrace that than to work on my ability to deny it and
mm.
push it away. And I rather do the things that I know keep me youthful, that are meant for me in nature, than to do the things that are just like unnatural. It's inauthentic, but it's artificial.
The
That's the word I'm
neighborhood,
looking for.
artificial. There you go. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Artificial, right? Like in this artificial way, as opposed to, yeah, guess what? Eating great natural, like nutrient rich foods that have antioxidants will keep me, younger in a certain way, or drinking more water, or doing more exercise, whatever, right? These things are meant for me. But then to inject toxins, and this is highly controversial, so I whoever's listening, there's no judgment on how you perceive these things. I think what's important to kind of take away is like people aren't going to do the thing because it's their paycheck or because you said so or because of what you're making. It whatever connects with their heart more or if it goes against it, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to deny who you are inside for too long, right? Like eventually that weighs so heavy to keep denying yourself. And that is not just in organizations, that's in like relationships, friendships,
Mhm.
um, you know, anywhere, projects, churches, wherever there's something that is not in alignment with your true like why inside is going to feel very draining. And so I'm not saying that to like change the why of your organization necessarily. But one thing that you were saying is like understand what are your employees' whys and maybe there was a different way. I know that some of the ways that people kind of dealt with this was like, yeah, we make money on this side of the business so that we can fund the other side of the business, which was for the plastic surgery industry, really helping those that have, you
Form.
know, deformities that they were born with that impact their daily lives in a way like what is this called cleft palate
Huh?
right and so or even like people that are having to get mastectomies because of cancer and things like that like it there is a humane aspect to that industry that is very important, right? And it unfortunately doesn't pay the way the beauty industry does, right? You can't make money that way, and so it was about okay, this will enable this. And maybe if you know that about your people, maybe there's a way to like elevate that feeling more, right?
You can weave
We've
that somehow,
yeah,
that there's
yeah,
like that sense of collectiveness because there's power in numbers, right? They say if you want to go far, go. If you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go together, right? So when
right.
you as a leader have the intuition, have the know-how, and have those those emotional skill set like sharpened enough, you can collectively weave through people's whys and bring them, in the right teams at the right places with the right initiatives and the right projects. And that brings color to your organization, right? Because it's not a top-down approach, but it's a collective approach. So
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, but worth exploring all the tools that we have in the EQ toolbox.
Yeah. And look, I had my master's in industrial organizational psychology, and I think that was one of the most eye-opening aspects of my leadership coursework was, oh, tr like real leadership is about actually involving everybody that you're leading.
Yeah.
Like,
And that's challenging. That's more challenging than
it
just
is.
calling shots. It's much easier to, rely on yourself and be that source of decision making and direction because you only trust yourself. But, I love Brene Brown and she's been a cornerstone of my, leadership studies. And that's not courageous leadership, right? That's not brave leadership. That is guarded leadership. And that is from the ego. And
Mm.
that will not be sustainable for any organization.
So Brene Brown, you brought up. So Brene Brown's whole message is also on vulnerability.
Yeah. Shame,
Yeah.
vulnerability, guilt, all those uncomfy emotions.
Yeah. And so I think when you talk about like avoiding these difficult emotions, what I like to talk about, and I've probably said it a bunch of times on the podcast too, is like the more you deny your negative emotions, the more you're denying your positive emotions too. Because it's the ability to kind of, it's like the pendulum is what I've talked about before. It's like the more we're able to go deeper into our negative emotions, the more we're able to swing into more of the positive emotions. It's like the broader the spectrum of emotions that we're able to feel. And
Yeah.
sometimes getting into our heart does mean like experiencing some of those negative emotions so that we can move to the positive, creative, love, passion, em emotions. And that requires vulnerability. And when you tell your story, right? Well, kind of weaving it back is like when you tell your story, are you just telling it? I always say, are you telling your story like you're telling the news? Like this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Or are you telling your story vulnerably where you're connecting with your heart and you really put people in your story so that they can feel it with you? And so, how do you kind of empower people to do that for their? So, talk about vision boards. Why are they important? How have you seen magical things happen from that exercise? And then, how, when you talk about, I'll let you talk about it, but that story of like, that was my story, and this is my story for the next act, the next phase, my future days, and creating that vision. Um, how do you, I guess, inspire that? How do you start doing that?
The importance of vision boards for me I mean, they've been magical. I think I told you last time that there was this one year I had put Ha Long Bay in Vietnam in my vision board. And this is the trick about vision boards. If you're listening, they don't really come to fruition that first year. Sometimes they take a little over a year. So it's that, that it really tapped into your sense of hope and faith and how much hope and faith you have in that vision that you've created for yourself. So it's in those times that our spirit is tested. And I think it took like 2 years for that vision board to come true. And it's insane because I found myself, on a 5-day cruise. I was coming up, just like, when you drink your coffee and you're on a cruise and you want to go on the deck to like just and sip that coffee with the morning dew and your sights and everyone's still sleeping and it's like just you on the deck. So I found myself coming up the stairs to that top part of the deck and just seeing the split picture that I had cut up from that magazine, National Geographic, years ago. And my vision board was tucked in my closet. I was in Ha Long Bay on this deck thinking, holy moly, this is real. And so that's the importance of having something that is visual, that is tangible, that you can, I hate to use the word connect again, but that you can connect with, engage with. And it's having that end result in mind that really attracts you and pulls you forward. It's like when you know what you want and when you can see it, unconsciously, the decisions that you make all align and bring you towards that specific picture. It's just
Yes.
magic. It's math, actually. It's like math.
Talk about that. Talk about the science of it. Because there's going to be those like achievers and, numbers driven people that are like, vision boards, woo, woo kind of stuff. Um, and so talk about why this works.
Yeah. I think if we talk about vision boards, we can't talk about them without talking about energy. And for my nerds out here, like energy is not created nor destroyed, right? So energy can either be anabolic, that's building up, or energy that's catabolic, that's tearing down. So when you have a very clear vision in mind, you are conspiring with the energy of the universe to bring you towards that end result, that end goal. The law of attraction, I love to speak about it when we say, have you heard that example where people say, like, if you start thinking of red cars, you see red cars?
Yeah. It's the reticular activating system.
Yeah, exactly. So there is that sense of reality that you can paint for yourself, that the universe is constantly conspiring. The law of attraction has been proven by multiple scientists back and forth. And so when you have that end goal in mind and you're clear on it, anatomically, we are connecting with it.
Well, because if we talk about the reticular activating system, it's like everything is kind of there. The world is as it is. And then we suddenly become aware of the red cars, right? It's like how our brain is wired to look for what's important. And so when you think about not just the red car, but like whatever you put on your vision board, really what you're doing now is telling your brain this is important and you will see the opportunities,
Exactly.
right? That you wouldn't have been paying attention to before. And that's how, like, you also emit when you talk about energy, like you're emitting an energetic state of seeking something. And I think naturally, when we emit that, the people that want to provide that will pick up on that and be
Yeah.
drawn to you, right? Like it's kind of like how we met,
Yeah. It
right?
really is crazy. And when you do that, you change your reality because a lot of us forget that, you know, if you're wearing red color glasses, you're going to see the world red. If you're wearing blue color glasses, you're going to see the world blue. So with a vision board, you actually get to change your perspective. And like you mentioned, having that vision and seeing it will enable you to create it. It's just,
So talk about why some people are afraid to do that. Some people are afraid to put things on a board and say, this is what I want.
yeah, I think a lot of us grow with blocks, right? Just in the name of safety to protect ourselves from uncomfortable emotions, we either employ limiting beliefs or interpretations or assumptions that keep us in a place of stability. As humans, we want to know what's coming next and we want to feel safe and secure. So, a lot of the times, people have a hard time dreaming from previous experiences that may not have manifested or limiting beliefs that may not allow them to think quite as big. So it's just being cognizant of those, recognizing when they're there and reframing them so that you can, slowly give them another purpose. Like if you have a limiting belief, you recognize what that purpose of that belief is serving and you can recognize it and bring awareness to it. You call it to life. You say, this is your name. This is what you're doing for me. Now I'm
Yeah.
give you another name and I'm going to give you another purpose because I am the author.
Yeah, so like very practically, right? An example I can think of is like, oh, there goes negative Nancy again, right?
Uh-huh.
And then it's like, that's my protector. It's trying to keep me safe. Thanks. I got it from here, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's one protective mechanism, but there might be others, right? Like it could be when you think about, you said limiting beliefs. I think some people are like, I don't think I have limiting beliefs. I'm just realistic, or I don't have limiting beliefs. Like, this is just how it is. Like, you look at the math, it doesn't work out any other way, da da da, da, right? Those are your limiting beliefs. Just even those beliefs are the limiting beliefs. That's just realistic. The math just doesn't work. Those are the limiting beliefs. And the reason they're limiting is because you can't think beyond that circumstance to see possibility. Because if you look at any situation, you will always find, like, we've been around for thousands and thousands of years at this point, right? So I find it very hard to believe, which it would be impossible to believe, that someone in a situation like yours or similar to whatever you're describing hasn't had success achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And there was always a first one. So there's no reason you couldn't be the first one.
exactly.
And so the limiting beliefs keep you from asking the difficult questions. Like, what is this asking of me? Like,
Mm.
how can I rise up to this situation? The how can I make this possible? What can I do to make this possible? What would have to happen to make this possible? Or more importantly, like you said, who would I have to become to make this possible? And then the belief is so important. And that's where, faith comes in because if you don't believe, then there's no,
If you don't believe, you cannot give your sense of self proof that there is something worth believing in, right? It's just that self-fulfilling loop. You
Mhm.
believe it, have faith in it, a little bit of hope, reality comes through, it happens, you believe it, and you move on to the next thing because you keep yourself in that cycle, of possibility.
What I heard in that was like, if to make this real practical for some people that are having a hard time with that, is you need to actually start to give yourself the evidence. Maybe start with something smaller, but something that feels impossible. Like maybe it feels impossible for you to go to Greece one day, but maybe it also feels impossible for you to, I don't know, something that maybe you can take actionable steps now. Like, is it to get a new job? Is it to lose weight? Is it to I had a client that started surfing when she couldn't, when she had deathly amount of fear of getting in the ocean. So it's like, what feels impossible right now that you can actually take actionable steps towards it so that you can get that proof, like you said, and keep staying in that momentum of getting evidence that things are possible even when they feel impossible. And, maybe it's run that marathon, like in my case. And one of the things you've done, and tell me how that came to fruition before we kind of wrap up, because I feel like it's a great story, is you call it the happiness tour.
Oh yeah, the happiness tour. Um, I think the happiness tour for me was an inflection point. It was my stand against burnout in corporate America. And basically, it came from a vision where, I said, I want to go see the world's happiest countries. It was a decision I made based on my value of curiosity and wellness. And what better way to mix curiosity and wellness together and just go on this lifelong trip? So, long story short, I decided that I was no longer going to be in that job that I was in. I set the plans in motion to get my certification in coaching and basically just saved for half a year, made the math for me with a lot of hope and faith. That math does listen to hope and faith, by the way. People think it doesn't, but math does listen. So we toured around the world's happiest country, so basically all of Scandinavia. And I was really curious to learn how different societies live and how they live together and how they coexist, what they're eating. I'm so passionate about the blue zones of the world. So I wanted to go to Singapore. So I went to Singapore. I went stopped by Greece. There was just so many different little stops. I think it escapes me how many countries it was. We were away for 18 months and it was a complete life reset. It was just a reset. I needed to take myself out of the environment that I was currently in and give myself the opportunity to have a new identity. So that happiness tour really got me away from the calendar and the meetings and the schedules and the to-do list and the tasks. And, I was just so caught up in that, in my analytical brain and my burnout self, that's where this advice of taking yourself out of the environment and connecting to play is so vital for me to keep speaking about because it's truly what worked for me. And it changed the course of my life.
Wow. It's so powerful. And I want to know, like, where were you in life? Were you some hotshot CEO making hundreds of thousands of dollars that you could just get up and leave for a year and a half?
You know what? I was a whiskey brand ambassador. I had spent 7 years building my career within the alcohol industry. And it was a little bit of like a beautiful morning because I had taken the decision to kill this dream and mourn with it. So um it was beautiful in the sense that I started as an event tray person. So like I would carry the trays around these events and I had the alcohol in my hand and I thought I'm going to educate people on this and I'm going to do it in a couple years. And slowly but surely, I went from carrying the tray at the events to being the person that they would send to liquor stores to sell the bottles, to being the educator that was creating and developing the brands within the hotels and the restaurants and the bars. And, you know, all of that came true because I had that vision that I was going to be a brand ambassador. And it's kind of quirky that I've maintained contact with some of those industry friends and acquaintances because my my next vision is to inspire wellness within the world of alcohol. So I'm still keeping in touch with some of those people because this is where this next act comes in of being able to bring that message of hope and reinventing and change and transformation in the name of wellness to a previous past life of mine.
So interesting. There is such a big movement of like mocktails and, non-alcoholic.
Adaptogens and
Yeah.
mindful drinking and yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious, is that where you're thinking to make
um
that impact?
I think that is one slice of the pie. I think as visionaries, and I'm sure I'm not the only one where you just have so many visions, so many ideas, so many things you want to conquer that it's a matter of organizing them based on your values and priorities. So that's one slice of the pie. Got some
Yeah.
other tricks up my sleeve.
Yeah. Well, listen, I love that you were courageous because so you saved up for 6 months in this, role. It's not like you were making tons of money. And then what happened? Well, how did you get through 18 months of no income coming in?
Yeah, so I had saved and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna become a life coach. I'm gonna do it while I'm in Bali. That's gonna be my identity. But what do I want my next role to be? Like, what do I want to do? And so I took some inventory of my gifts and my passions and my values. And one of them was storytelling. I love storytelling. It's something that was passed down from my dad. He was a great storyteller. He would, in college, he would go to downtown in the capital of Colombia in Bogota, and he would just tell stories, and he would draw people from all corners to come into the middle of the city. And so storytelling was a big factor for me. And so I said to myself, well, that is something I'm good at. It's something I like. Who does storytelling? And so motivators do storytelling. Oh, but copywriters also do storytelling. So maybe I want to be a copywriter. So, because I had done my due diligence of figuring out what my values were and what my strengths were, my passions, and storytelling was one of them, I started communicating to the world. I said, oh, I'm going to become a copywriter, or I am a copywriter, I think is what I said. And there was a beautiful opportunity that was brought on when I was in the south of France by a good friend of mine who said, hey, we're looking for a copywriter in my agency. And I thought, aren't you really? She said, you want to apply for it? I said, heck yeah. So I applied, I got the job. And so for the next 9 months out of that 18-month hiatus, I had income coming in as a copywriter, doing that virtually for the travel and tourism agency.
I love that. I love that. Hey, and for anybody that's feeling kind of lost in their career, I definitely went through that exercise myself too, where I was like, I, I am so burnt out. I'm not sure how I got here. What
Mhm.
else is there? Um, and it was like, do I even know who I am anymore? I'm so burnt out that I don't feel
Myself.
joy. Like I don't feel myself. I don't know who myself is, right? It's like myself became product manager Diana. Like that was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, and I was like, there's got to be more to me than that. And so it was about sitting down and taking inventory, like and to push through those very uncomfortable moments of I don't know, or there's nothing else. It's like, no, there has to be something else. And to be really like uncomfortable in asking other people. Like I didn't want to do that. And then eventually when I couldn't come up with a single thing, I was like, I have to ask some people, like some people that know me. And even if it's just your significant other, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, you're like, nobody really knows me. Well, they at least see you most of the day, or your
Yeah.
boss. So it's somebody that spends the most amount of time with you, that you can trust to say some positive things. And it's like, what's made you successful to this point, right? Like, what was it really? It was, yeah, sure, it was your hard work. It's true. But there's other stuff. Things
Mhm.
like I asked a lot of questions. I was very curious. I learned everything I could about that because I needed to find out. I was curious about how it worked, why people did things the way they did. And then like the more I dug into like what made me successful in this role to this point, the more I got to know myself. It was like, why did I ask a lot of questions? Like, why did I dig so deep into knowing our competitors? Like, the more I understood myself, the more I could kind of say, okay, well, what areas of the world could I contribute these gifts to? Kind of like you said, and you said, well, copywriter. And sometimes people get caught up in like when you choose something, it doesn't mean it's gonna be the end thing. It also doesn't
Your
mean,
what? It's not your who. Like you
well,
can be whoever
yeah,
you be. You can reinvent yourself whenever you want.
yeah.
And that's the magic about reinvention, that it's exciting and it's scary. And if you don't feel it's scary, you won't get the exciting. Like I don't think that these opportunities would have happened had I not taken the scary chance of saying, you know what, heck out of here. Like we literally put the house up for rent. Danny, that's how Danny made his income. He bought this house a good time ago where, it made sense financially. We put all of our things, he built a little closet underneath the staircase, and we put all of our things underneath that closet, and we said goodbye.
Detachment. Yeah.
Yep. And that's when things are born and reborn.
But what I love about that call to adventure, right, is that there's so much uncertainty in that. And yet that also is what opened up the doors for so much magic, like that opportunity that came to you. And for me, I switched up what I ended up wanting to do like three times after that, right? Like I every time that I said, okay, maybe this could be it, it changed and then it changed again and then something else in life happened and it changed. But it's when you step back and you see all the actions you took, all the ways you were drawn to this new thing, and what's the common thread, right? And for you, it was storytelling. For you, it was, this these values that you had. And I think at the end of the day, it's what you said about in our story, we get to understand ourselves better. And as we understand ourselves better, we can decide what we want to create for the future. I love that. Well, thanks so much, Juliana. This has been awesome as usual. Do you have any like last thoughts on vision, creating your vision for your life, or um, how people can dream bigger, or
Yeah. Something that popped up for me yesterday was as I was thinking before falling asleep about this podcast and our recording today, was the realization that hope is a requirement for vision, but faith is a result of those two.
Mm, I like that. I've never heard it framed quite like that before. Hope is a requirement for your vision, but faith is a result of the combination of your hope with your vision. Okay, let that sit for a little bit. I always thought faith was the kind of like the thing that drives the vision, like what drives you towards it. But maybe you don't have faith if you don't have a vision, right? I have to think about that some more.
I appreciate you having me. I've had a
Thanks you,
blast.
Juliana. So, if somebody wants to like join a vision boarding event that you host, I know you also do some like mindful movement events, or they want to connect with you online. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can either go on my LinkedIn, Juliana Arango, or they can go on my website, julianaarangocoaching.com, or you guys can join me on my newly minted Instagram, jarango_wellness.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Juliana. I really appreciate you taking the
See you on the
time.
next one. Ciao.
See you next time. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Courage and Purpose. I hope today's insights inspired you to take bold action and align your life and career with what truly matters to you. If you're ready to dive deeper, I invite you to download my free Action Indicator Assessment, a powerful tool to help you uncover what's holding you back and take the next step towards clarity and confidence. Just visit www.lifeonpurpose.coach/action indicator to get started today. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who could use a little extra courage on their journey. Until next time, stay true to your purpose, lead with courage, and keep thriving. I'll see you in the next episode.